recording. If you hear my lips smack or breathe on the recording, I'm sorry. I do not have the best audio setup.
That's fine.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just start with my first general thoughts from watching the stream back, and then just thinking about general pedagogy and stuff like that, because my background is largely education. I've been coaching for about 2 or 3 years now, specifically in Overwatch. I did tutoring all the way from high school onward. So it's been about like 6 or 7 years of just dealing with general education stuff, and I also did basically an entire education minor, but our school doesn't offer it, unfortunately. So I'm shit out of luck with that. But either way, that's my backgrounds. So I'll just start with generally my thoughts on kind of how you guys might be able to approach development as a team. So I think the strongest thing that you guys have available to you is the fact that you've built your team around making a personal connection with one another. Your communication structure in game could use a little bit improvement in terms of focusing everyone, but the strongest thing that you guys do is have a strong flow of communication and trust in one another's ideas and calls. So this is something that is taking us a little bit more time to really flesh out, just largely because we have a bunch of introverts on our team who don't want to ever talk. But you guys seem to have it down where it's like, all right, we want to experiment with this, we want to try this, let's talk about it now, let's get this verbalized. Let you have like a process for that. So I think building on that might be the next best step. I would say the largest weakness you have, which we also suffer from, is there seems to be a large knowledge disparity. I won't even say skill disparity necessarily, but the knowledge disparity in a team setting is, I think, a lot more punishing a lot of the time. So what I'm starting to do with the team is I'm actually working them through fundamental compositions one at a time. So as you saw last night, we pretty much exclusively ran Rush. We've been running it for 2 weeks. We're going to run it for another week. And then after that, we're going to go into Bunker. And then after that, we're going to go into Dive. So you still have about 2.5 months before competition starts. If you wanted to try to hone in on a little bit more of a core identity for your team and start playing something a little bit more consolidated. And the reason I think this would be a good idea is because when you have a knowledge gap, I think it's much easier to focus on a single composition where you start thinking about the ways that everybody interacts with one another and interacts with specific maps rather than thinking all of the different ways that you could potentially play even a single map. So you guys played Bunker last night, you played Dive, you played Rush, and those are usually the three fundamental compositions. But none of them really seemed like everyone on the team had a full grasp of what their role was. So, like one of the things I really I'm focusing on with the NJCU team is like Lucio's job is not necessarily, especially if you're not a Lucio player, it's not necessarily to go looking for big boops off the map or do a ton of damage or, I don't even always want you to have beat to counter every Dragon Blade, but what you need to be looking to do in a rush composition is you are the legs of the team. You need to be mobility first, you need to make sure that everybody's grouped and stacked, and then you need to make sure that you're communicating where your cooldowns are so that you can work with your Reinhardt. So when you have people who have knowledge deficiencies and you give them very niche specific roles to fulfill, they tend to use that as kind of like a template for filling in all the other information that comes along with being part of that composition, right? So if you tell your monkey, listen, your job is space creation through bubble placement on supports and then area denial through like cleave damage with the Tesla cannon, your Winston can then look to isolate situations where they can do that and learn how to play maps, at least on a fundamental level, just by looking for those two situations. So that's my general first consultation. Do you guys have any kind of questions or thoughts or anything that you want to spitball back and forth now before I go forward?
Nothing yet, personally.
Okay. And if you disagree with anything I say, just like let me know because I'm still, we're always learning, always developing. So if there's anything I say that you're like, I don't think that's fucking true, asshole. Okay. So I'll get into just going over. I'll give you guys just the time of going through some of the maps. What I'm most curious about is I kind of want to hear what your idea for your compositions and your play style is. So do you guys have an idea of how you want to be playing or what compositions you prefer to play?
Um,
Go for it.
I would say our. So yesterday was really the first day that we played like that like Farmercy like Winston Diva like kind of dive comp. Um, I felt like once I saw how it was working, I felt like it fits a lot of our players' strengths a lot. So that's something I know I'm gonna want us to be trying out more in the future. Um, we also, I think Rush is another like relative like comfort pick for us, just um, largely because two of our strongest players on our team are our two tank players, which um, like Rush can like largely be tank led, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I actually would contend that we do better. It's a small nuance that I think that me and Adam had talked about previously, the difference between like Rush and Brawl. I think that we're slightly better at Brawl than Rush. I know that they're like very fundamentally similar comps, but the thing that I think that we excel at best when it comes to Rush/Brawl is um like primary engagement with Reinhardt, because like we said, our two best tanks are probably like our Reinhardt and Zarya combination. Is that like the in primary engagement with the Reinhardt, and then when the Reinhardt dies, if they die, setting up a position in which like the Zarya can like mid fight carry, or
Hmm.
having the Moy, our DPS, also mid fight carry. I think that that type of brawl comp specifically is probably one of our, in the previous season was one of our strongest comps.
What would you
Believe it or not.
guys define as the difference between Rush and Brawl?
Um, the amount of based off what I understand, like the amount of time spent inside of the fight, like when you're doing the most amount of damage. I don't know if you know the Thor videos, that kind of
Mm-mm.
go over the overview of like all of the different comp styles, but like the graph of like a team fight, where like Dive is at has that like really high peak. I think that Rush is a little bit more of a peaking comp, whereas Brawl has a little bit more of a spread out, but obviously they're a lot more consolidated when compared to like Spam, where it's just like you just do damage all of the time.
Yeah.
Um,
I would say rush comps are largely built around characters with mobility, uh, compared to Brawl, which is kind of just a walking death ball. Like Rush can kind of jump around target to target
Okay. I
whenever there's an opportunity.
I think I understand the difference that you're saying. So you're saying a rush composition can be something that like it's not necessarily Ryan Lucio is the mainstay and we kind of clump together and run. Rush can be
Mhm,
like Winston Ball and we're rushing at a kind of location and kind of swarming on that.
mhm.
Is that am I getting that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
So largely I don't classify them as those like I don't classify Rush and Brawl as necessarily different because the second or the monkey ball composition I would fall more under in my mind of Dive. I think
Mhm.
that there's a wide range of kind of how you can classify compositions, and when you say dive, like you have dive hybrid, and then you have like 15,000 different versions of a brawl composition, and then bunker can be split, and then you can have a double sniper with a bunker. So when it comes to actual terms, I don't really care, honestly. It's just interesting to see how people kind of classify things. Um, so if I call it rush, that's just I'm talking about what you would call a brawl composition, but my terminology would be to call it rush. So just so we're clear.
Mhm.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that's it. That's good.
so dive and then brawl are the two mainstays that you guys kind of want to look at.
Yeah.
Okay. So dive in my mind is definitely the more logistically challenging composition, the more or strategy just in general. Just because of how many moving parts and how little everybody actually like in dive the monkey is doing something different from the tracer, doing something different from the Genji until they all collapse, right? So you have to isolate each independent part and talk about it before you show how they collapse. Rush is kind of like, hey, stack together, scream that you want to kill the Reinhardt, and then go kill the Reinhardt. That's part of the reason why I started with Rush for us because it's just I think it's better as a starting composition to kind of get your feet wet with understanding, just isolating everybody's responsibility and stuff like that. So, would you guys want me to just do a review of the maps that you guys played in the context of the composition, or do you want me to run through like my thoughts on how the composition can be broken down and explained?
You say those two again?
Okay, so do you want me to run through Numbani and Hanamura and just talk about, okay, we tried to run Rush here, how could we run Rush here better? Or do you want me to talk about, like, let's just talk about Rush as a blanket statement and just isolate the parts of Rush and isolate the parts of Dive? just talk about the compositions, or do you want to talk about them in the context of the game? Because if I talk about them in the context of these replay codes, then I'm going to look at specific instances and correct more player, like individual player moments than I would if I'm just talking about overarching compositions. Overarching compositions, I can get into the nitty gritty of just what you, like, as, let's say, a May, or as the CC playmaker of the composition would do.
I think I would lean towards the second one.
Okay, so just talking about the composition on the whole?
Yeah, I don't know if Peter or Helen agree or not, but
Yeah, I think that the composition as a whole is something that like overall the entirety of the team can benefit from mostly.
Okay.
I will say I just pulled up the replay code on Numbani defense. We did play spam actually.
Yeah.
Just to let you know. You had already seen it. Never mind. But yeah, that's.
Oh, what did I want? Okay. So I'm gonna bring a PowerPoint up. Do you guys see this? Yes, you see it there. Okay, the recording sees it. Nice. This is, I did this for the players. As you can see, I'm very professional. Hey.
You should see the PowerPoints that we churn out. It's kind of incredible.
Yeah?
Yeah, we
They
make some
are.
banger PowerPoints.
Oh, you're gonna have to share.
unless I'm in charge, then they're kind of just like.
That's why we
yeah.
don't put you in charge of the PowerPoints. That's all.
I have often made the PowerPoints, and they've
I've
been
often
better
been
than
sad in those
potatoes.
meetings.
Oh,
Kind of like mashed potatoes is the best way to describe it.
Okay. So this is the base kind of composition that I laid out. This is like late 2019 Rush after they did 222 lock, and finally we got to see Corey and Carpe back on DPS in the Overwatch League. This was what they figured out would be the best type of Rush to play for that time period. It's not necessarily true right now. It seems actually like a different Rush meta is developing again. But what I want to get to know is kind of like what your Rush composition would be. So the mainstays generally, and let me switch again now, see I'm already doing it, Brawl, are generally going to be a Lucio and a Reinhardt if you're trying to go for a Brawl composition. And this is where I think the difference between the Rush composition and the Brawl composition for you guys would start, where you could run Monkey, let's say on Numbani, and run a Monkey Rush composition, but it wouldn't necessarily be a Brawl composition. So if you're running Brawl, then the Lucio and the Rein are pretty much necessary. But in terms of the other hero options, who would you guys want to see? Or
I
who do you
think we
think
sometimes
would fit? Sorry.
Diva McCree.
Diva Cree? Okay.
Sometimes swap in an Ana. I don't prefer for the Ana, but sometimes we do Ana.
Sometimes
I
the
really-
support player is more comfortable on the Ana.
Yeah, I really love Zarya, but I've been like getting more accustomed to Diva because like I feel like the skill ceiling is higher with her, especially if they're going up against Zarya. I think that I've been focusing on like eating ultimates, like primary ultimates, and it's been very effective.
Yeah, it was kind of annoying.
Yeah, I don't know. I was having fun.
Yeah, no,
I
you're
was
doing
still
good.
like very annoyed because I thought I was gonna do a lot better than that, but it's Diva can be very pivotal, especially higher level divas. So I've been trying to get my Diva up to that level. So I think that we've been running more Ryan Diva because it can be so influential, especially going up against harder teams, which is very much when we went up against an ECAC.
Yeah, that's gonna be the end goal, right? You always want to push to be better and better. So I'm trying to find my tokens. I know they're around here somewhere. I made these through. Do any of you play D&D?
Yes, I know the
Absolutely.
exact website that you got them from. I also have made tokens with that website.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're good. They work, you know?
Yeah, they
they're
work
great.
well.
Okay, I don't know where they are, so I'm probably just gonna wind up typing. I have to organize my folders, but either way. So Zarya or Diva, right? And then it would be May or McCree. Why did I do that? There we go. Instead of BAP, Ana, right?
Sometimes Ana.
Sometimes
We prefer
Ana.
the BAP, but sometimes sometimes the support's more comfortable on Ana than BAP.
Okay. Any
So
others?
we're flexible with it. Sometimes a junk for the Reaper,
Okay.
if I'm correct.
Yeah, depending on the map, we might go like junk and sim, like the map everyone always plays first.
Li Jiang?
Yeah, Lijiang.
Yeah, Li Jiang.
Every single time.
Every single time. We love Li Jiang here.
Yeah,
We don't.
Flash S.
If you don't say you love Lijiang, then you will lose it every time because the map is bitter and cold.
Exactly.
I thought Nepal was bitter and cold.
Yeah.
Not wrong. Not wrong. Yeah. So, any other options?
I think that's usually our flex picks.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is pretty much our wheelhouse. There are things we would like to try, but this is like if we were ever to like do something, these are definitely the ones that we've done.
Once in a blue moon, we might throw in a Hanzo, but not normally.
Okay.
Yeah, those are very specific. Like we've scouted, like they have a really good sniper, and we will need to both play Brawl, but also need to deal with like a specific player.
Yeah.
Or like Rialto, for example. Is it?
Oh God, I love Rialto.
Yeah. I'm a little bit sad about Rialto yesterday because for the first season, we actually never lost Rialto. But we swapped out some players.
I'm sorry we took that from you.
Yeah, we lost both of
2.2
our
meters.
DPS, so we used to
Wait,
run
2 by
Widow
2.
Ash. Yeah, they were asking me after. They were like, "Did we win? Did we win? Did we win?" I was like, "We won in the lessons we learned along the way." And they were like, "Fuck you, coach."
And yeah, they cried.
Yeah.
In my head, I'm like, "You fucking lost, nerds."
Just get good at the game.
Yeah, right? Okay, so let's talk about this. So I'll start with the Ryan and the Lucio since they're the mainstays. So the reason that Lucio is the mainstay is generally because you're going to have a lot of slow characters. So like I mentioned earlier when we were talking, the Lucio's job is usually going to be focused around making sure that the team is grouped and passing through large damage threshold areas with speed amp. So this is going to be areas, and I'll start contextualizing a little bit. You see I brought up these old images that have the graphics and stuff like that. So if you're playing, let's choose a better one because normally you just run sim and then you TP past. What's a really good example for this? Because I'm sure there's somewhere that's a super good example for this. I don't have all the maps yet because I just was working with them one at a time with the players. Okay, let's just do King's Row. So if you are a Lucio player and let's say your rotation is through Hotel, generally the space between choke or the space in front of choke, if the opponents are holding you at choke, which nobody really does on Kings Row anymore, but you use speed amp to get through this space because the most dangerous part of choke is when your players are, or your team is actually in this space condensed because it lets splash damage happen. It's easy to hit targets by accident, especially with like when you think of Hanzo arrows. If you just log an arrow into that space and Ryan happens to drop a shield or there happens to be a lapse in defense, then that arrow is very, very likely to hit a headshot just because once you're in that space, it's so easy to just hit anyone. So Lucios are going to look to get your team through these areas that are highly dense concentrated damage areas. So generally you'd speed past choke and then you'd look to pass this gap and speed through Hotel. There's going to be a lot of different situations or a lot of different contexts. But the way that I tell my Lucio player who's still learning Lucio to think about it is to think about where would you least like your team to be. If you would think about your path and along the way, you're like, I really don't like when the team is here. For whatever reason, let's not even think about logic. I really don't like that when the team is here. Then you're going to look to speed amp out of that location so that your team minimizes the amount of time that they're spending there. So all you should be thinking about to start, first and foremost, is going to be, how do I maximize the use of my speed by recognizing where my team least likes to be? The bad spaces, get us out of the bad spaces. So as a Lucio, you're going to be grouping people, you're going to be speeding people, you're going to be, taxing people when they die and you need to get them back into the fight easier. But these are all things that revolve around the single utility that only Lucio, no other character has the ability to do this for the team. Only Lucio can modify speed for the team. So your entire focus when you're starting ground level is going to be just worrying about speed. The next level is generally going to be, how do I actively use beat? So there's a few things to know about beat just in case you don't. Beat has a linger effect, so when you round corners or go past shield, even after you've actually hit the ground, the beat will apply within a 1 second window after you've activated or hit the ultimate on the ground. So you can use that to counter sim ult or to get to a tank who's past an enemy shield somewhere, and that way you'll be able to hit both sides of that. Additionally, I learned this yesterday actually while messing around. This is something I didn't know. You can animation cancel speed amp into beat. I did not know because Lucio raises his hand when he does the speed amp, but you can stop him from doing that whole animation by just going into beat. So beat is generally going to be used as a momentum swing. So ultimates can be seen as an extra character or hero on the field for that given period of time. When you drop beat, if it's an even fight, you've made it a 7v6 because now everybody has enough health that they're getting the value as if there was a 7th person on your team. So if your team is on the back foot, if you've lost an individual player, if you're looking to just get the next step forward in a team fight, you can look to use beat to leverage any of these opportunities where it's even or close fights. Your guys' discretion at how you decide to use ultimates. Every team uses ultimates different and every play style is different. So one of the examples that I used for my team was if you looked at the GOATS meta, one of the biggest differences was between the San Francisco Shock's play style and New York's play style. And Vancouver had a similar play style to San Francisco, so I'm not even going to talk about them because Vancouver's garbage. But either way, San Francisco was all about taking the fight to the opponents, making sure that they set up traps. When the enemies entered certain spaces, they would collapse on them. So for instance, if we were, we'll give you guys this blue circle here, right? If your team is the blue circle and then the enemy team is the pink circle, as soon as they move into what you would call a kill box, San Francisco would go, that's our space, we'd like to fight there, and then they just go. Alternatively, they would use this to set up advantages and opportunities, take people off guard, play at a faster tempo, etc., etc. Speed is such a big thing in competitive Overwatch. You'll notice that the faster you're able to execute ideas as a team, the more likely you are to just win, just because the enemy team can't react fast enough. But by comparison, what New York would do is they would play super far back, they would give a ton of space, they would keep a singular tank on point, and then as soon as the opponents got antsy, made a mistake, or did something that left an opening for the New York to attack, they would counter and push back into them. So this turned out to be a little bit of an inferior play style, but if it appeals to your team's kind of like sensibilities and play styles, then it can work just perfectly fine for many, many different levels of play. So when it comes to thinking about, how you're going to use your ultimates, you can think about them in the context of, are we going to use ultimates to counter, to push back into them, or are we going to use them aggressively? I see 3 people low, I'm going to drop beat, A lot of the ultimate conversation, especially for supports though, should be happening in between fight phases. We call these downtimes. When the fight is completely over, even if there's one player still kind of shooting back and forth, you confirm that kill, and then immediately you start talking about, all right, I'm going to use my beat. Don't use lamp or don't nano until after beat has come out, because I'm going to use beat as soon as I see 3 people critical. If Ryan gets critical, I'm going to save him with beat first and then we'll use nano. Whatever your train of thought happens to be for how you guys want to stagger out ultimates, the conversation should be happening prior to games or in between fights so that you can start to be flexible and stage your ultimates in an appropriate manner. So Lucio, first phase, like I was saying, going to be that speed, making sure you're keeping your team together, getting them out of the spaces they don't like to be in. And then the second stage is going to be, how do I think about proper use of my beat and make sure that I'm getting value out of my ultimate? Third stage, you're going to start to use a little bit more, or a lot bit more wall riding, making sure that you're staying out of your team's immediate area. Either you're wall riding above them, or you're constantly playing the floor as lava so that you're not getting caught by Winston Tesla cannon, count enemy Rhine swings, stray damage. You want to avoid that by playing on walls, playing on areas near or around your team, but generally not inside of them actually, which is a really weird thing to think about, because generally Brawl, you think everybody stacks on top of each other, but your supports have slight nuance in their spacing. And part of that third stage as well is also going to be getting maximum value out of your boops. So boops have 3 different purposes. First is the one everybody loves. Boop them off the map. It's a free kill. Second is going to be you boop them towards your team to punish them and put them out of position. So if you looked at what was it, World Cup, I think 2019 as well. I think it was around the same time. There was a really good boop that USA did, Moth had on Rialto, where he took a wall ride across the left high ground right behind bridge on first point, across the bridge. And he took a wall ride, booped people from behind the shields, Orisa shield that they were setting up because they were playing a bunker, and he was able to actually get environmental kills, but more so the idea was you're booping them to get them from behind the shield to put them out of position. You'll also see Lucio's do this rollout on Dorado, first point high ground when you turn the corner. Booping them from behind the shield or off the high ground will give your team an opportunity or advantage to confirm a kill and win a team fight. And then the third boop is you boop people away. Is there a Reaper on your Rhine? Does he not like that? Get him away from him. Is there a Mei who's freezing your Zarya? Boop her away from them, you know? So that's kind of the 3 stages of Lucio that I break down. The reason I go so in depth with Lucio is because I think it's one of the roles that is the least intuitive in a team setting for players who have never played in a team setting, right? So like it's all about thinking about what your team needs and how to interact with your team first. And you almost never are going to look at the enemies until you've gotten a good grasp on how to work with what your team needs to do. So I'll just chain into the BAP/Ana after that so that we stay in the support line. So it's a much simpler role for the most part. You have your big life-saving ability, which for BAP is going to be both his window and lamp. And then for Ana, it's going to be nano. So you have big life-saving ability, big damage, big heals. So it's important not to be a heal bot. As Ana, I would say one of the most important things that you could possibly do is look to hit nades that splash both the enemy team and your team. And the goal should generally be to hit the nade right before or right as the team fight starts. If you hit a nade or a sleep when nobody's doing anything and nobody's around to follow it up, if you don't have a Widow or Hanzo that can snipe that shot for you, the sleep's not really getting any value. So you want to look to be using your utility right before the fight start or right as the fight start, because that's going to stop the fight from ever being dangerous for your team, and then it allows you to get your cooldowns reset fast enough to use them later in the fight. If you're getting dove, always save one of your cooldowns for yourself. If a Genji's in your backline, make sure you always have a sleep or a nade to be able to keep yourself alive for a little bit longer. But the main job of this role is going to be, I heal when my team is low, I damage when my team's not in threat of dying. Generally, you should have a ton of sustain between both of your tanks, whoever your DPS are, especially if they're a Reaper Mei, and this is one of the reasons this showed up, is because Overwatch League compositions, you'll notice when you start to study them more, they're not looking to maximize damage or maximize healing. They're looking to mitigate risk more often than not. So both, when you play Reaper and Mei, they both have their own escape options. So the supports no longer have to go, oh my god, my Reaper is critical, I have to die to save him. The supports go, yo, he got raped, he alright, like, he's fine, he'll live, you know? So you kind of have to balance these resources and balance the way you're paying attention to the team fight, because not every moment for this main support role is going to be about, I need to heal my team. Sometimes it's going to be that echo that no one else can really hit is one shot. Let me confirm that kill really quick, and then let me make sure that my Mei is stabilized, because that Echo can carry the fight with her ultimate. Or that Pharah has the ability to 1v6 if we leave her in the sky, because no one can hit her. So it's a little bit of a simpler role. Just shifting from right to left, as if we're reading in Asian language. You have your, what I classify as your playmakers, and then your follow-up. So your playmakers are going to be CC enabling characters who can look to find ways for your team to confirm kills. So generally everybody's going to be looking to deny damage in any way they can. The CC is going to act as a way of opening opportunities for, usually it's going to be your Reaper or your off tank, or your main damage or your off tank to kind of confirm those kills. So if you're playing Mei, you should be looking to get your freeze as much as possible. If you have your ice block, you should be, or your wall, sorry, you should be looking to kind of split the team. And this is something that's taking my Mei's a little bit of time to figure it out. But let's say if this blue circle is the vague enemy team formation, if you wall even vertically because there's no good wall area, and let's say if the support is split from a support or a tank, this now denies the enemy team the opportunity to interact with one another. So even Mei walls like this can create opportunities where now if you're a rush composition, you can go, okay, we're going to rush the right side now and just kill these 3 people because this is a 3v6 on that side of the wall. So you can create all sorts of opportunities through these kits. McCree obvious has his flashbangs. You're gonna usually swap to him to counter a Pharah, something like that, or just to alter the way that you're doing damage or alter your breakpoints. But generally, they both are going to be looking to get their stuns. Then you have your general damage dealing. So Sim and Junkrat also have CC, which makes them a little bit weird when you think about the way that I just explained May and McCree. The reason I put them on this side of the list is because Junkrat's primary form of value is not to use his CC. His concussion mine can boot people around, and sometimes the displacement can be really strong, and his trap can be really strong. But in organized formats, most people aren't gonna get caught in the trap. Like, let's be honest. Like the Ryan's gonna go, oh, there's a trap in front of me, and Zarya's gonna go, all right, give me a second. So if you do catch people, it's super cool, and it can win you team fights. But generally, in higher ranks, the trap is used for scouting, actually. So you would place the trap behind your Ana if they have a Tracer who's been in the back flank a lot, and then if the trap breaks or gets triggered, you know that the Tracer is on your Ana, and you can react to that accordingly. But it's not going to be his primary mode of getting value. He's usually going to be sitting in the formation or sitting in a slight off angle in order to follow up on the opportunities that are being made by any of the characters. If Lucio boops someone forward, then the Junkrat should look to confirm that kill as soon as possible, because the Lucio is putting themselves in dangerous positioning generally, going into the team, getting a boop from above, in order to open that spacing up for Junkrat to get damage past the shields. So you should be looking to follow up these opportunities rather than your DPS going, I need to do this on my own. This is my job to do damage. So my job is to find my own damage without my team. That's usually what happens in ranked, and that doesn't work as well in team settings because you will get denied in multiple ways, right? Even if you're running a Zarya D.Va together, their defensive capabilities can be layered in a way that negates most of the damage a lot of the time. But in ranked, that would never work because the coordination isn't there enough, so you can punish that as a DPS. In a scrim setting, the coordination is way too strong. You can't just go wandering into the team or wandering on an off angle. I yell at Genetic about this all the time. He needs to stop going off. I know he's goated, but Jesus Christ, this kid needs to stop wandering. So just be careful with those wanderers because they could be good sometimes. You can catch people off guard. You can open up team fights by using strategies and stuff by coming from different angles. But there's opportunities that these characters are making for you that you could be taking advantage of. You're missing free kills essentially. And then Sim also has CC, but her CC is slow. The reason I put her in this is just the slow. The reason I put her in this category is because her damage is phenomenal for one, but generally the Overwatch League meta that seems to be developing is a Mei Sim. So Sim seems to be able to do everything that Reaper can, except she has a team TP instead of an individual TP. And she has... My brain just died. Wow. Okay. Restart that for some reason. But yeah, she has utility. I think that was it. So she has her slow, her turrets, she ramps on shields, she does a ton of damage, and she has a team TP. She's just a better Reaper in most ways right now. There's times, sure, when you still want a Reaper, because he can still be an early fight shield buster or tank buster. Sim takes a second to get into the fight like Zarya does. But Sim seems to be the kind of Mei Sim seems to be the meta rush pick right now. Hanzo, I mean, it's the same thing as everybody else. So the notes that I made here, pressure space created. You don't have to try to make your own space, like reinforce what's already there, finish targets, and if you're on an off angle, make sure you're coordinating your aggression. So I do this sometimes and I forget. Is there anything that I've said that's too fast, doesn't make sense, you disagree with, or you want me to go over again?
I'm good with it so far.
Yeah, I'm good so far. This is all really helpful.
Okay.
I will ask about the sim thing, because I've been watching the Overwatch League and the recent like sim meta that's been developing.
It's so fun,
really,
dude.
It's fun. It's amazing because like, I don't know, they're very creative with how they teleport. I was just wondering like if you have any insights into like, what are the limitations on that? So like, do you think that there are like certain maps that sim should just like absolutely not be ran on when it comes to like brawling it out with a sim? And B, I'm not sure about this, but like for our sim player, what do you think is like what does a sim do in the mid fight, or how do they like can you like go into more specifics of like running a brawl? We have a sim, maybe specifically like a May sim. What should the sim be doing like pre-fight, start of fight, mid-fight, end of fight?
Okay, so the first thing to remember. Okay. Let me do it this way. First, how is it used, and then where should it not be used, or where do you think it's not good? That was the first question, correct?
Yeah, the first question was just about TP. Well, no, the first question is more like just sim in general. Are there just points where it's just like don't use it? Like,
Yeah. Um, it's mostly gonna
or
be the big maps. Rialto, don't touch around Rialto. Numbani, like first point, like where are you gonna even set up? You can set up your if turrets. If you know it's a hard rush mirror, you can set up your turrets up here and trap in this doorway. But if they come down main or if they're running a monkey, then you're gonna get significantly less value out of sim, especially on a big open map like this. Um, I always want to see the maps because I can never remember. There's too many maps in this goddamn game.
yeah, they've only taken out two.
Yeah.
Sad. 'Cause one of
Um,
them is actually good.
I also liked Horizon Lunar Colony.
Thank you. I didn't say it on purpose. I didn't say it on purpose because I wanted to see if you would get it right.
A second
Well-
point. Second point is a mess.
Second point's a mess, but first point,
I like it. I enjoyed myself.
yeah, I had fun. I enjoyed my stay.
The real question is, when is Kanazaka getting turned into control point?
Yes, I love that map. It's such a good map.
Kanazaka is pretty awesome. It's big. It's so fucking big.
Dorado has a lot of high ground, so you could still get value out of that. Havana, probably not, because second point is closed, first point is open, not a lot of TP space. Where are you really gonna TP on first? I mean, you could take high ground from Widow, but you can do it better ways than using a TP, I think. Route 66 is probably not super worth it. I mean, where are you really setting up TPs again? You can TP across second point onto the catwalk to be able to clear that space out, but most teams are going to hold staircase near the bar in the middle. In which case that you're gonna play on cart or you're gonna play a dive. I think what it comes down to is sim is really good to counter sim. So on maps where sim is OP, like Hanamura, right? We just see Hanamura Li Zhang, you need a sim. You need sim on both sides. So what I'm noticing is on a map like Hanamura, where and this was my absolute favorite thing to see because I was like, how did we not figure this out sooner? Where, the attacking team was looking to TP to like one of three locations. The opposing team was just like, we put TP here and then we just have it bring us the point. So instead of having a messy rotation or risking a messy rotation on miscommunication or whatever goes on, we just TP. Rotation done instantly. So I think if there's anywhere that you have to rotate really fast, and usually that's only going to be against another Symmetra, you're generally going to want a Symmetra. And then she's also really good in areas where you just have to be in small spaces. So, you're in a tiny space here. That means that you have to look to get value out of those turrets, or you're going to be ruined by those turrets. I think if you were to go to Volskaya or Temple of Anubis, there's definitely areas where you could just absolutely deny the enemy space by playing Sim. I think it's just going to come down to kind of personal strategies at this point because it's fairly new, and I haven't really thought it out all that much yet.
Yeah. On Hanamura, do you think that it would be a good idea to run a defensive sim on Hanamura?
Yeah, because like I
Or
said, if
run
they're running
all
Sim, this
defensively?
this TP is just so good for not because rotations are super strong. So when you're rotating, and one of the rotations I showed my team was going through this pagoda and then up the stairs, up bridge around apartments to scaffold, or onto point rather, not to scaffold. But one of the purposes of this is if the enemies are playing kind of like a weird split rotation or a split composition, their formation is all over the place, they're playing bunker or something like that, their supports could rotate to the wrong area and then you just get a free fight win because their support's rotating correctly. So especially if they're running a sim where they're just TPing straight past you, if your supports don't rotate properly with your tanks and the point in mind, then you've essentially just lost the fight because your supports are going to be out of position, they're going to get punished. So if you run the sim and just have your team TP back, then there's no risk of rotation. You've removed an entire element of the game essentially.
Okay.
That's why I was like frothing at the mouth because I was like, oh, it's so good. You just fix the whole rotation problem. Just TP go. In terms of playing mid fight, start fight, so Sim generally, like I said, has to ramp into her damage. So her early game is mostly going to be thinking about making sure her TP is set up and then making sure that her turrets are down. And she's going to need to do some maintenance on this throughout. But the biggest thing for Sim, like it is for Zarya, is just don't die. Because your beam takes time to D-level, so you can come back into a late fight. Like you saw Tat was able to do it. He was playing Sim. But he came back into the late fight and was able to 1v1 the Sig and win that fight out, essentially. Because he had level 3. Like, what are you going to do as a Sigma once your resources are depleted if a Sim comes at you at level 3?
I'm sad about that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. They were really
It's
excited, though.
It was very sad.
But yeah, so staying alive is a big, big number one. But the second thing is that your focus is generally going to be similar to Lucio, your auxiliary, like, because first is going to be damage, staying alive damage, and then just making sure that your TP, whatever you want to do with your TP, is being clearly communicated. Because there have been some interesting strategies where, let's say on... Did you see the Checkmate? Did you see Checkmate play?
The backwards pin.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
Checkmate play. Adam, please don't watch Checkmate. You're banned.
I
Get any ideas?
You know what I watched? I watched Fearless's face watching Checkmate play. I
dude.
watched Fearless's face cam just watching Checkmate pin into his team every single fight. Fearless is like, what the hell is this DPS player doing?
Yeah.
It just felt so, I don't know, it was just like brain dead play that was sometimes working.
So
I hated that it worked so many times.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's why it works, because it's like they're just not thinking about that's what they're gonna do, because it's an inoptimal play, so you never see it, so you don't prepare for it. So then inoptimal plays get more value, and it's like, wait, no, don't, please stop putting your DPS on main tank. But yeah, the TP normally wouldn't be done with the Reinhardt, but especially if you have, like, let's say if you wanted to just take a Kree into the back line, or if you wanted to, like, just do a dive in a way, like, Sim TP can set up for a weird dive. You can have your Rein shield here, and then set up a TP that just, like, goes onto point, and then your McCree just shows up, flashes, and then just instantly TPs back. Or, let's say, and this is actually something I just thought of, which I kind of want to try now, because Genetic has a good Genji. You can Sim TP your Genji in, as long as, because in a chaotic fight, the Sim TP is hard to keep track of. It has a very light sound cue, so it's hard to hear over really noisy thing like a Rhine swing and Zarya alternate fire and Lucio amp and all that shit. So the Sim TP is hard to hear. If you put it past the enemy's line of sight and you just TP your Genji in when he has Blade, he's essentially gotten the most important part of a dash, which generally you want to get the dash reset, but he's gotten the movement part. He's closed the distance on the enemies while not using any of his cooldowns, and then he can still dash someone and draw his blade and then dash again. So you can make this really fast, probably chain of movements for certain characters by using a TP late into a fight to set up a backline flank that doesn't take the normal. Normally the trade of a flank is like you evaluate, does the amount of time it takes to get into that position net you equal amount of kills or damage. If you take 30 seconds to get to a position, and normally in Overwatch League, team fights are about 25 seconds on a normal meta where it's not heavy sustain. So if you take a full team fight's worth of time to get into a flank position, then your flank better get you 5 kills at least, because that's the amount of value that you're looking to get. You're looking to get a team fight win by surprising them. So if you're taking a 10-second flank, then you want to get like 2 or 3 kills. If you're taking a 5-second flank, 1 or 2, etc., etc., etc. But if the TP is giving you instant flank potential, then even just getting a stun in or finding ways to get some utility into their backline can be super dangerous, because it's instant, right? You're not risking anything really by going there until they start countering you by having the McCree constantly look for the TP. But that's where you get into kind of like counterplay, the same way like last night we were grabbing your Genji essentially because we couldn't handle the blades.
Yeah, he was upset about that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Our Lucio's not really at stage 2 of that whole Lucio process, so he doesn't know how to beat the counterblade.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah. What I would say though is you can think about it in a layered format. Like you had a diva, right? So if you're pulling blade and in order to stop it, we need to invest grav. Just defense matrix the Genji when he pops blade, and then you'll just eat free grav every time. Like that's the levels of kind of like back and forth counterplay you can get into sometimes.
That was actually something I tried calming pre-fight a lot. Is like whenever we would go for engagement and we thought Zarya had grab, I would just like and hard DM Zarya like to begin the
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah, that's how it worked almost all the time. Adam and Demoy's calls were really good yesterday, where essentially like you would just go in and be. Demoy counted it down a couple of times too, literally just like Zarya's in
Nice.
3, 2, 1, and
Boy's a monster.
he is a monster. I don't understand how he works.
That's a feel good moment. But yeah, does that generally answer your questions about? And I haven't maybe thought about sim interplay enough to answer it more fully, but yeah.
No, I mean I think that should be good. Our sim player won't be here for long, but I think that'll be helpful for when we do pick up a new sim player, and Ripper's gonna like replace that role essentially. So.
Okay. All right. So anything else, or should we hop into the tanks?
You can hop into things.
Cool. So yeah, Rhine is kind of simple in a way. Like this is always the conundrum of Rhine Monkey, right? They're very, very simple characters, but they have a lot of depth in the nuanced interactions that you can have, right? So, and this is a joke that I have with I can't bench anyone because we just don't have enough players, right? So I always tell them I'll bench you, and they're like, aha.
What a mood. Bro,
Um,
I'll threaten to keep people off the team all the time, and they know there's no way because I can't replace that.
No, yeah, but this is the biggest thing, right? Like your pins are a punish maneuver. They're not necessarily looking to kill, confirm, or to get damage. They're generally going to be used to. And my girlfriend is walking in the background. If you guys can hear her, she's just got home. But they're generally used to punish. So like if the enemy Rhine pins in somewhere and doesn't get any value, and he's like, you know, very, very close to a wall, then you punish with the pin. You know, if somebody gets in a very, very tight space with you, you're going to punish with the pin. You're going to usually use it to punish. If you use it for damage or to confirm a kill, it's got to be a nanoed Genji or with blade or something like that, because you're forsaking the main damage mitigation of your team. And generally the best part of a brawl composition is the fact that you don't actually have to pay a lot of attention to map geometry once you get pretty good at it, because Rhine Shield is a moving wall. That's all the map geometry you need half the time. So when the map geometry kind of pins into the enemy's backline, it's a little rough. But generally you're looking to cleave onto as much of the entire enemy team as you can. Farm up that shatter. Make sure that you're mitigating CCs and hard utility like Ana's nade first and foremost. Damage is great, but sleep dart will kill you. Like you can take 400 damage and survive. You can usually not get hit with anti and survive because it's really, really hard to save you at that point. You have to invest specific resources to be able to counter it, and if those resources aren't available, then the enemy team can just run you down. So your shields, and this is more so for Monkey than it is for Rhine sometimes, but your shield is used to block utility and specific life-ending CC than it is to block just straight-out damage. But that damage mitigation is still super important. A way you can think about doing damage or pushing into the enemy team as Reinhardt is you can think of it as if you are fighting a person, right? So if the entire enemy composition was a person, you wouldn't go and punch their arm, right? You wouldn't hit the part of them that can take hits all the time. Though it might be good to smack the tanks around to show dominance, you're generally going to look to cleave or hit into the vulnerable parts of their composition. So if you punch somebody in the kidneys, if you hit him in the stomach, that's going to actually do damage. It's going to force them to back up. It's going to pull out resources. It's going to make them think about what they need to do. But you need to be able to get into there, so that's where the Lucio and the Zarya kind of come in, right? Lucio needs to speed you into that space. Mei should be following up and making sure that the Rhine can't just punish you, right? If she has her freeze on Reinhardt, then Rhine can't do much but stand there and just hard shield. So if you can get into the enemy composition, really hit at their core parts, then you can look to just deal a ton of damage at the parts that are actually about to die and start to open up the fight by getting a ton of picks and a ton of value just through sheer pressure. So I won't talk about too much about the specific Rhine tank nuance because I think there's just way too much to go into there. But I think that those are the core parts. Block the CC when you're swinging into the enemy team. Get those chunky parts in there. You know, hit the Ana a little bit. Make sure that the McCree feels your presence, and then Shatter. Just win the game with Shatter. That's
Yeah, Adam, take notes.
yeah. Okay.
Watch out for shields.
Yeah, beware of shields. They're dangerous. Okay, so Zarya and Diva do actually pretty different things. So Zarya, like I said with Sim, you're going to want to stay alive late in a fight. So don't blow bubbles too early because they are not just damage mitigation tools, but the utility mitigation tools. So if your Rhine keeps getting slept on the engages, then you should probably either look to use shield to block specific phases. And if the shield just can't be used there, let's say if the Rhine needs to drop his shield to swing, that's where you need to start using the bubbles and stuff like that. Don't blow them trying to get early fight energy, because if the fight drags on, you will wind up in a late fight with 2 squishies and a half health main tank, and you'll be sitting on 80 energy, right? You want to tempo throughout the fight your bubbles so that you can maintain energy. You will continuously climb in energy and wind up just being this late game monster that no one else can stop. And then Grav is a free fight win, right? Like if you get a good Grav, which are the only 2 counters to that really that you need to be actually aware of most of the time are going to be Sigma Grasp and Diva Eat. Because even if they trance beat or use some sort of like lamp, there's ways to counter that, right? If they lamp, then you have to just get in there, break lamp. If they beat, then you should be you can block beat with the shield. If your Rhine gets in there and wedges the shield in there, you can block beat, and you can do the same I think with trance. Can you with trance
Block
with
off
shield?
trance.
Yeah, you can
Yeah,
prevent.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I was remembering that correctly because I said it and I was like, wait,
Yeah.
that's fucking crazy. You could do that?
It works with every shield. I believe also Zarya's.
Yeah. So yeah, there's ways to counter the support utility coming through, but the biggest thing that you just can't do anything once it happens is you can't do anything if your Grav gets eaten. So that's really the only warning that I would focus on first and foremost, is just don't get it eaten. You'll be all right. Even if you only grab 1 or 2 people, like just confirm the kills. Grav is great for free fight win in terms of like 6-man Grav. But if you grab a high value target, if you solo grab the primaling Winston and then that Winston was fearless and he was carrying his team, like that's a free fight win, right? If you solo grab the Mercy and you're like, Jesus Christ, we haven't been able to kill this Mercy in like 5 team fights, that might just result in a free fight win. So free fight win doesn't necessarily always mean 6-man Grav. But just stay alive late into the fight. Don't be too concerned about having to carry super fast or get up to high charge super early. Keep your team alive. Make sure that you're putting your bubbles to block utility first and foremost, because at the end of the day, you don't want somebody to die. That's the end goal. So it's good to have a bubble that gets you charged, but it's a better bubble if it blocks a bunch of utility and gets you charged. I guess I can just kind of real quick, a little thing that you guys can do with these sorts of competitions, right, is you want to think about your interaction some of the time. So one of the things that I really, really love, especially in Rhine v Rhine matchups, is let's say that the blue shield is the enemy Rhine and the pink shield is your guys' Rhine. With the Lucio, you can combo speed amp and shatter to just get a free fight win, because this Rhine cannot rotate as fast as you can with the Lucio. So if you just rotate this way, even if the Rhine moves his shield, the rest of his team behind him is not going to be able to get in a position that actually works to mitigate this shatter. So you can literally speed amp to the left or right and just shatter people for free. It's funny, honestly. But there's a bunch of interactions between all of these different characters that don't even require you to, use 2 ultimates together, but simply just use your abilities together to net more value. Like I said, if Mei freezes a tank, she can't kill him on her own, but Reaper or a Junkrat or a Hanzo can follow up on that opportunity to just burst in a ton of damage, Yeah, so any questions in terms of this?
No.
Cool.
I'm gonna run to the bathroom real quick.
All right. So, it's already 6:30, and this is why these things are hard, because information, it takes so long. Do you guys want to end it here, essentially, and kind of just use this information and see how you operate with it, or do you want to get a little bit of kind of like prep information for dive?
Um, I think that like dive is probably like well I haven't played with the team all most of the summer, but in the previous season, dive was probably one of our worst metas.
Mhm.
And it was something that I always really wanted to get good at because when it worked, we worked really, really well together.
Ah.
And like yesterday, like we kind of just like ran it after not running it for a while, and it worked really well. And I think that it's something that we definitely can run more of. So if you have the time to do dive as well, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I can give kind of like a brief breakdown. I won't do any maybe like role specific stuff because unlike Rush, Dive doesn't have as concrete a kind of like simplified version. Like the most simplified version is probably Zen, Ana, Tracer, Genji, Diva, Monkey, but even still then like the level of interactions for those independent characters is just crazy sometimes. So I'll give kind of a brief rundown. What's a good map for Dive? I mean, there's a lot of good maps. I'll do Dorado. Dorado's a great map for
Gibraltar.
Dive. Gibraltar? Okay, Gibraltar, got you.
We don't say that map here.
You don't say Gibraltar?
We
No.
had a Gibraltar incident.
We did have a Gibraltar incident. And
Oh.
It pains me.
Correction. Peter had a Gibraltar.
Listen, why would they make a coast? Why would there have to be coast?
Oh
For
no.
context, Adam said grab and Peter threw the grab right off the map.
He said grab. There were only 3 people alive. They're like a grant. Okay, it was a great
You
grab.
are
I wanted
trolling.
to grab, but you said grab when I was looking at coast.
So
You pressed Q.
There was no angle. You could give it to a man with a PhD in trigonometry, and you would say that there was no angle in that situation in which I was gonna hit that grab.
You know what your
could've
other
said
option
no.
was, Peter?
What?
Take 2 steps forward, walk up the stairs, shoot it into the ground.
I was on. No, I was on high ground. I was on blue boxes. I was falling
you
off
weren't.
blue boxes. Yeah,
You,
was.
I thought you were at the bottom of the stairs. If you were on blue boxes, you
coming
had
up the
no
stairs.
excuse to miss that grab.
Maybe I had jumped off blue boxes onto stairs, and I probably should have stepped up further. But
Oh,
my
maybe
main tank was telling me to grab, so I grabbed.
Anyway, it's the Gibraltar incident. So Gibraltar is it's a little touchy.
It's like
I hate
that
it there.
sometimes.
I don't play Zarya on Gibraltar anymore.
Probably my favorite.
I mean, at least you didn't grab in the cracks of Third Point King's Row. Or
I've never done that. It scares me. I have had nightmares.
or you didn't do
I've
what
seen
our
too many
main
new
tank
monkeys.
did and just literally jump off the map twice in the same game.
Oh my! I did. Wait, it was a scrim last night where I tried to flux out of getting frozen when I got pinned off the map on Third Point King's Row, and I
No.
just
Lord.
got frozen straight into the hole. That was amazing.
That
Oh,
was really
no.
tough to watch.
I kept on cackling the whole time.
But yeah, we'll look at Gibraltar. Yeah.
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 No triggers, right? Nobody's gonna.
No, we're good. I'll
Okay.
just imagine I'm playing Diva.
Okay. Well, you would be because this is dive, right? We're talking about dive.
Oh, perfect.
All right. So I have done the rush, like you saw. I had a PowerPoint ready. I haven't done the dive presentation. I haven't even prepared it. So I've talked about dive before. I've run through it a few times, but I haven't done it in a while. So excuse me if I kind of backtrack on information. It might be a little bit messier than the rush one was. Not sure how much more messy. But the first thing that I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to break dive. So now we're talking about dive. Brain, come on, get it together. I'm going to break it down into sections, right? So sections of dive, right? So we're going to have a staging section. We're going to have a diving section. And then we're going to have the regroup. And in between this is going to be, of course, the brawl. The, like, mid-game brawl or whatever. Or mid-fight brawl. So each of these is going to have its own components. And they're each going to have an attack and defense version. So I'm going to try to go through as kind of like baseline as I can. Because like I said, dive can get very, very deep. Especially since it's one of the older compositions at this point. Like Bunker is actually fairly young compared to Dive and Rush, and I think Dive is actually even older than Rush is. So in terms of like nuance and strategies and the different ways you can execute it, I can think of probably at least 10 off the top of my head for just Gibraltar alone. So I'm going to start with staging. So generally in a composition or in a team fight, you would have a poke phase. Both Brawl and Dive do this thing where they don't like the poke phase because their hero selection does not do well in poke. Poke is the stage where you're kind of just idly shooting at enemies. Maybe you get a pick if you're lucky or if somebody makes a really bad play, but you're not committed to the team fight. You're not using abilities or resources or, like going out of your way to hunt down people. You're just kind of idly shooting. Dive characters and rush characters generally don't do very good in those stages because they don't generally have very long range abilities. Genji has a little bit of poke. If you wanted to play Reaper, he has no poke. Sim has her orbs, I guess, in rush. Hanzo has some poke. Doomfist has no poke. So most of these characters just don't have a lot of good poke. So what you're going to be doing instead most of the time is you're going to be pathing and staging. So let's say if the enemies were or opponents. I try not to say enemies sometimes because it just sounds so violent. Kill the enemies. Anyway, let's say if the enemies were playing on top of here or on top of these boxes on this high ground up here, generally what you need to do first and foremost is path into position. So we're going to set up a situation in which you're Winston Diva, Genji Tracer, Zenana. Very basic, very old composition. But the first thing you need to do for your tanks is get them within a 1 leap or 1 cooldown distance of the opponents. Newer dive compositions get them within a 0 cooldown distance of their opponents most of the time. And the reason is because if Monkey has to use his cooldown to get in, there's no way in hell he's getting out. Especially with a lot of the CC that's in the game nowadays. So in this situation, your Monkey would normally jump onto bridge, or you can call this catwalk if you want. And then if they were on top of boxes, he would rotate around and come from this inside, or he would jump from the outside depending on what was a possible option. If they don't have any heavy spam, you walk from the inside because like I said, if you use your jump cooldown, you're shit out of luck with getting out if something goes wrong. You're pretty much committed to the fight. So the first thing is going to be staging, right? And this is where it gets confusing because Winston's going to jump up here. Diva can hold below so that they have different angles to play from. They're not taking similar spam. Tracer's going to try to take the stairs. Genji's going to sit under Diva with maybe Zenyatta, and Ana's going to sit on cart. Once everybody is in a position, and you have to, that's right, okay, so you have to scout. You have to see where the enemies are. Generally, Tracer or Sombra will do this. This is why Sombra can be so good in dive compositions, because she's free scouting. There's no risk to her scouting most of the time. So you scout, you see where the enemies are, and then you set up positions based on where they are for engaging on them. Then your Monkey, who has to go first in the composition, will generally call a 3-2-1 jumping initiation sort of setup. The reason the Monkey goes first is because Monkey Diva are your damage mitigation, and Diva's damage mitigation is projected in front of her, which means it's better when it's actually cast on a singular target rather than just thrown out into the open. So the Diva should be projecting her defense matrix onto the Monkey as he jumps, so that when he lands in a location, there's a very, very low risk that he'll get hit with some form of CC or utility that will shut down the dive, because the first Monkey initiation is super important to hitting his landing cleave damage and then dropping his bubble. Bubble splits line of sights for supports and isolates people in a way that, like I was saying, Ryan's shield is moving map geometry. Winston bubble is the same thing for support line of sight. So Monkey bubble will isolate targets. If you jump on a McCree and he's getting Ana pocketed from a million miles away, once you bubble him, the Ana is as good as dead because she's not influencing the fight anymore. The bubble is stopping her from influencing the fight. So the bubble is going to create opportunities for then the Tracer and the Genji to begin making their way into the fight a little bit more. So it's going to be 3-2-1 dive. Monkey's going to jump in with Diva right behind him. Genji's going to use the bodies of the tanks to close distance, and Tracer's generally going to come from an off angle because she has insane mobility and escape. And generally, they're going to collapse on a single target. So let's say if you can do 2 types of dives. You could do locational dives or target dives. Locational dives say, we call this blue box, right? I'm going to dive blue box. We're going to dive blue box. So no matter who's up there or what's up there, someone's up there. And you're going to start calling targets once you get up there. You're just going to jump and get to that location and then call targets. The second is you're calling a dive target. So we're going to jump Zen. That means before you even get to the location, you know exactly who your first target is. The reason you would use locational dives instead of target dive is just for the factor of sometimes there's just not a good target. You just needed to get into the dive and start things going. And then once you land, you realize, holy shit, we just chunked the fuck out of Brig. Let's finish her off real quick. Or, oh my god, I didn't realize their Ana was so out of position. Let's go get her. Locational dives are also for clearing out space. So sometimes you'll make a locational dive onto something super important like blue box to clear people out of it so that you can then make another dive from blue box. A dive doesn't always mean you have to be hyper committed to the fight. It just means you're going to force a location and you're going to control that location after that. But you need to communicate beforehand what your plan is. So we need control of blue box. Let's dive it. Let's clear them out. And then we'll go from there, right? Then you get up there, you reset your cooldowns and you go again. And when you're resetting cooldowns, again, this is a staging phase, so there's no poking. People shouldn't, and this is my biggest pet peeve, people cannot be looking, just staring out in the open to duel the McCree from 50 miles away as Genji, because that's a losing duel. Almost every character in Dive is a losing duel at long range. Even Zen, who can perfectly well outduel a McCree at long range, is a losing duel because if you lose the Zen, he's going to probably be more value than the McCree. It's about valuing yourself then as a player, right? The Zen's damage buff through his Discord orb is so huge for like all of the free damage that Dive does, right? So without a Discord orb, Genji Dash does 50 damage, but with a Discord orb, I think it does 65 damage if I'm remembering correctly. And then same thing for Winston Leap. I think it does, and you can animation cancel melee right before you land. So that's 30 damage on top of an additional, I actually don't remember at all what Winston's Leap is. Hold up. What is Winston's Leap damage? We go to the Google for this. Winston. Okay, it's also 1 to 50, depending on how close you land to them. So if you think about Winston Leap and Genji Dash hitting the same target, if it's maximum opportunity, maximum value, maximum damage with Discord Orb, that means between the two of them, you've done 130 damage to a target before you even had to put in any effort. So Zen's value in a dive composition is huge, which means nobody should be poking. Because even if you kill that Kree, it's not as much value as if the Kree killed you. More than likely. You're assuming, right? Like, you should be thinking of yourself as a high-value person within your composition. Something that helped my players understand some of this too more is the win rate in the highest level of play. Or, okay. Actually, let me phrase it this way. So for you guys, how many kills do you think guarantees a team fight win?
In my mind, it would be like 3 or 4.
Okay.
Because you can win a team fight, essentially. Because winning a team fight mostly just means getting like enough substantial enough space to just push something, or get enough space out of payload or cap a point. You don't necessarily need to see the full team wipe.
Yeah. There's a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, I would say like up 4, we've won the team fight pretty comfortably. After being like up 2, I start to be like confident that it's not going to be lost. But I wouldn't say it's won until we're up like 4 or so.
Okay. So in the highest level of play, which I always use it as an example because it's so much more black and white, and it's what you kind of want to, in a way, push for. Like, you're always going to move towards this. But in the highest level of play, a one-team fight 80% of the time is 1 kill. And the reason is because once a single part of the team composition is removed, there's an advantage that the other team has that your team doesn't. So, like I was talking about with Rush or early on, everybody has a job. And once the ability to do that job, right? Like, if America suddenly couldn't mine for coal anymore, then suddenly we're missing a core part of our economic infrastructure. Looking at you, coal miners. Sorry, guys. Anyway, but if your Rhine dies, the enemy team has a Rhine shield and you don't. So you can abuse that difference to win the team fight. That's usually what happens at higher levels of competition, is that the difference in resources will determine who wins and who doesn't win the team fight. So if you die in a team fight, it can be very, very big, because that 5v6 fundamentally should mean, if you're trying to strive for the best, that you're taking a very hard to win team fight. And you'll see that even in low ranks, like, sure, you can turn a team fight 5v6 and dumb stuff happens all the time. But there is still a little bit of a numerical advantage to having a 1-up, right? It's just, it's like fairly obvious when you just think about it as like a black and white linear thing. 5v6 means I'm more likely to win. Yeah, makes sense. So when you think about that poke phase, when you think about should I get a little bit more alt charge, or oh hey, I see that Kree, I can duel him and maybe win, you should also think about these numbers and these percentages. How much am I setting my team back by peeking out behind the shield right now, or peeking out behind this bit of cover? So scouting, staging, diving, and then after that you get into Brawl, which you guys, again, like I was mentioning, the organization looks a little bit all over the place. So I would say the biggest factor in terms of confirming kills in a team environment is focus fire. And it's just because at some point there's such an astronomical amount of damage that you can do in an instant. You change the breakpoints to such a degree that no amount of healing can really save a proper amount of focus fire. So I think you guys sometimes just lapse in your focus fire, and especially in a dive composition where everybody on their own only does very marginal amounts of damage, it could be super important to make sure that you are taking part in the team fight, not your individual fight, you know? So yeah, it's going to be about that. Scouting, staging, diving, brawling, and then resetting, right? Then you're just going to basically go back to the start once you've either won or lost the team fight. And that's going to be the general dive loop again and again and again and again. So I'll talk about two more things just to be aware of. So the first is going to be dive on defense, which a lot of teams find weird. Dive on defense is going to be about that kill box that I was talking about earlier. So when you are... get out. So when you are playing on defense, you're generally going to say, we like playing in this space. So as soon as the enemies walk into this space, we're actually going to dive that location. So this is another example of locational dive, where you're going to just go after a singular target. So you'll set up places along a path where you'll say, we like taking fights here, we like taking fights here, we like them here. So if they enter any of these spaces, we jump them instantly. It's automatic response. And then the other thing is sometimes Tracer can be what's called a catcher. So you saw that I was, with the example that I was putting Tracer up on the staircase, but I was saying we were diving these boxes. So when Winston, Diva, and Genji all put pressure on these boxes, the enemies will drop, and they usually drop with low health, which means Tracer will be sitting in this backspace, and she can still shoot up, but she'll be sitting in this backspace, catching them as they fall to confirm the kills. So her job isn't in the initial dive. Her job starts with the scouting, and then again towards the end of the brawl phase where she's just confirming kills. Any questions, things that you don't agree with, or anything that you want to kind of go over again?
No, not that I can think of. I think, yeah, the whole Tracer thing, we've always just been kind of telling our Tracer just like stay on the flank, like you are flank control. Seeing it more as a catcher might be really helpful when it comes to like attacking, because typically what we'll do is they'll be on the assignment of like, if there's another Tracer, obviously your job is to just at the very least control the flank space, whatever the flank is on whatever map it is, you need to be controlling that. And I think yesterday as an example when we were on Lijiang third point, to deny a recontest, like our Tracer just went to the antipode of where we were, like we were holding bridge right side from our perspective, and like inside on left, like white room essentially. She went over there and just like controlled that space as best as she could, and then sees a Reaper that Reaper's gonna touch. That's perfect, just controlling the flank. But that's also kind of like catching.
Yeah.
I think it could be effective when it comes to like that dive moment, you know.
Yeah. It also can kind of fill out some of the moments, because if you're thinking of, depending on where you're thinking of like setting things up, so if you wanted to stage it like that, let's say if you guys were attacking, your flank angles are generally going to be this back staircase anyway. So Tracer can control this area right here. And then as soon as it's clear, there's no flankers, then you move straight into, okay, now I'm going to catch for the dive. So it kind of sets up like a 1-2 sort of situation. I think that's something that, and I use the shock a lot for a lot of examples because they've just been so good for so long, right? I can't go around there, I guess. But Striker used to play on third point in Gibraltar this one space all the time. And it was so good for fulfilling both of these kind of like roles where he could control this flank and also catch the enemies. So this was generally once the cart had gotten to, and I'll use black to represent the cart, got into kind of like this space, he would generally hold all of this space back here on his own. And what would happen is if anybody decided to push that space, he had a health pack over here. And if he really needed to, he could, you know, stretch himself over there or go back to his supports, depending on the fight, to try to sustain himself in this area alone. And then if the enemies got pushed back for whatever reason, he now is instantly in their back line or way around into their support line if there's no pressure over there. So it's almost like it forces them to flank because they have to also check this space that Striker's only going to leave if he doesn't have a fight to take there, you know?
Yeah.
Striker kind of be goated though, so.
He do be goated.
He do be goated.
Also, that room is just chaos. I avoid that room like the plague as a tank.
Yeah.
Striker did be goaded.
No, he do be goated. Don't you talk bad.
Yeah, yo, he could ons us anytime, okay? It's all just marketing. That's all Shock is now. It's just marketing.
All market. They're just waiting for the finals, anyways.
Just turn it on. Of course, he's on vacation right now.
Yeah. They just set up the Rhine AI workshop code in place of Super.
Oh, no.
They might do better.
No. You're obviously a super viewer. I see you. But yeah, you guys have any questions or anything you kind of want to go over? I just ask that all the time.
Nothing I can think of.
Okay.
Yeah, no, not for me.
So yeah, I'll kind of just leave it at that. Goodbye, rest of the team. If you guys happen to watch that, it was fun screaming you guys.